What if the people you sit beside every day, the ones you laugh with, eat with, and call family, are hiding storms so silent, even you can't hear them? What if love isn't just in words and gestures, but in the burdens we silently carry for each other until they break us? This is the story of the unseen weight every family bears and the truths we're too afraid to speak. If you crave stories that unravel the invisible, peel back the silence, and reveal the fragile beauty hidden in our everyday lives, follow this channel. Here, we don't just tell stories, we expose the edges of humanity you were never meant to see. There was a silence in the Thompson house, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, aching kind, like air thick with unshed rain. It clung to the walls, settled in the corners, and pressed against the windows. To anyone passing by, the house was ordinary. A tired-looking sofa, a dining table with the familiar scuffs of lived-in years, and photos lining the hall, all smiles and sunny days. But those photos were only paper-thin truths, bright moments floating above a current no one ever dared to name. Sarah Thompson sat on the edge of that sofa, fingers twisting the sleeve of her worn sweater until the fabric stretched thin. Outside, dusk descended, painting the world in muted grays. It was 6:30, the moment she always felt her heart tighten. Mark would soon walk through the door, carrying the invisible weight of a man too tired to name his exhaustion. Upstairs, Emily's laughter trickled through her closed door, but it was the kind of laughter meant for screens, not people. Sarah was the quiet architect of their lives, her existence woven into the fabric of the home itself, a presence unnoticed until something went wrong. Her burdens were rarely loud, rarely seen, rarely acknowledged. But they were there, pressing into her spine, bending her shoulders, reshaping her breath. There was the burden of knowing everything and nothing at once. Where the spare keys were, how long the milk would last, the unspoken moods of everyone under her roof. She knew the difference between the silence Mark carried after a good day and the silence that spoke of another battle lost at work. She could sense the storm behind Emily's door, even when her daughter's voice was all laughter and sarcasm. There was the burden of emotional labor, the endless softening of edges. Sarah absorbed their anger, their fears, their quiet disappointments. She folded her own worries into silence, tucking them into the space between laundry loads and late-night dishwashing. She made peace with invisibility, because that's what mothers were meant to do. Become the air, the water, the floor beneath their feet. But Sarah wasn't alone in her unseen burdens. Mark carried his own, the ancient weight passed from father to father. Provide, endure, protect. His fears were quiet things, living in the creases of his palms and the knots in his shoulders. The world outside their door demanded so much, and Mark had long since stopped believing he was allowed to ask for help. Even Emily, still cocooned in her teenage skin, knew the taste of invisible weight, the pressure to be liked, to be funny, to be beautiful in ways no one could define. It all sat heavy in her chest. Her bedroom door was her armor, her phone her shield. But even in her sanctuary, the weight followed her. She felt the quiet tension between her parents, the way silence had become their most fluent language, and she wondered in the secret corners of her mind if she was somehow to blame. It was a Tuesday night when the power went out. The house fell into silence. A silence so deep it scraped against their bones. No hum of appliances, no glow of screens, just darkness and each other. Sarah stood at the sink, her hands submerged in cool dishwater, the faint scent of soap rising like a memory. Mark sat at the table, his hands pressed together as if in prayer, though no words came. Emily hovered at the bottom of the stairs, drawn into the stillness, like a moth to flame. The words slipped from Sarah's lips before she could catch them. "I'm so tired." They were not loud. They were not dramatic, but they were the truest words she had spoken in years. Mark lifted his head. Emily's breath caught. They were not meant to hear, yet they did. And suddenly the house was no longer just wood and brick. It was a heart, and that heart had finally spoken. "Me too," Mark said, his voice quiet but steady. The words were small, but they were a crack in the dam. For the first time in years, they stood at the edge of their silence, peering into each other's fragile humanity. Sarah was not just a mother. Mark was not just a provider. Emily was not just a child. They were people, each carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. In the flickering candlelight, they talked, halting, awkward, but real. Mark confessed how afraid he was of failing them, of not being enough. Sarah admitted the crushing loneliness of being needed but unseen. Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, about the fear of never being good enough for anyone. Her friends, her parents, herself. They didn't solve anything that night. The bills still sat on the table, the laundry still waited, and morning would bring the same weight they always carried. But for a moment, they stood in the light of each other's truth, and the weight was just a little lighter. Because the cruelest burdens are the ones we believe we must carry alone. And in that house, absolutely,